Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things.
Today, I'm in conversation with Nani Narayanan Srinivasan, who's the leader of data sciences at HomeUnion. I've known Nani for over 4 decades, from the time he was my senior in college and later on a colleague and a very good friend. His enthusiasm and curiosity are contagious. So in this conversation, Nani talks about his interest in system software, telecom and R&D, even though he started studying metallurgy, and on to being a consultant, understanding domains and solving user problems. He also shares a couple of stories on some things that didn't work or how it was, in hindsight, a fairly simple thing to do, but complex challenges that needed to be solved for customers. He also talks about building efficiency in remote teams and his career advice for both people considering a career in IT as well as mid-career professionals. Listen on. Hi, Nani. Welcome to the Software People Stories.
Thank you, Shivaguru. Thanks for the opportunity and interaction. And I like this for two reasons. One, we are catching up after a long time. And the second one is definitely the experience we all have gained would definitely help the next set of people who are actually looking for input from others, right? So from both points of view, I like this session. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, this is one reason, a forced reason in a way, for us to connect after a long time. Even though we've been intending to talk, at least this
Correct.
is the thing. And definitely the other reason also for starting this whole podcast was to share our experience, some things that we learned the hard way, or we found something useful, which could be useful for others. Many times you find that people go through similar learnings and stuff like that. So a good place to start would be your origin story. How did you get into IT, and how has your career trajectory been? And we can take it from there.
Sure. Yeah. I did actually metallurgy, bachelor's degree in metallurgy from Indian Institute of Science. As part of doing that, in the last year, that's a 3-year course that it was. And as part of the course, the last year I was given an assignment to do blast furnace construction in a methodical, algorithmic way. That was given to me as a challenge by my guide, Dr. Lahiri, Professor Lahiri. And so that got me into programming. And ASE had IBM 360 computer then, and so I learned Fortran programming. And I have a friend who was also instrumental in essentially triggering me or guiding me and or directing me into making me interested in computing. I'm sure you know him. His name is Gopal Swami Ramesh. And between Ramesh and I, we on our own, we started getting interest into automata theory. And with the blast furnace construction modeling as well as algorithm, the automata theory, it essentially evinced interest in computing. So that's how my interest was. Though I did metallurgy, I got into computing. Though I did not have a formal degree then in computing when I was doing metallurgy. Then I got into postgraduate master's in computer science from IIT Chennai. So I applied for it and I got it. And that actually put me into computing path. And that's a simple starting story, how I got into computing. And even today, the development, the direction computer science has taken, it really is mind-boggling. And in terms of the development of various algorithms and models and the application of those in varieties of industries, verticals, and the language development to bring in process efficiency and automation, etc. it all boils down to the original thinking that went on into theoretical computing.
Yeah, nice. Interesting. Because G. Ramesh was a guest a few weeks earlier.
Okay.
It was also very difficult to get him. We were planning it for a long time. And it was, again, a very interesting conversation, somewhat of nostalgia and what he's doing now, etc. So after this, you got into, at least with Tata's, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then, we also had the opportunity to work on some projects. But
Right.
I still remember that you were working on some very interesting projects.
Right.
So what has been your own learning journey in terms of the roles you played or the kind of technologies that you had to, say, learn and master? How has that journey been?
Okay. So it's an interesting question also. In terms of when I did the master's, couple of profs essentially mentioned if you want to really stick to industry, then you have to learn COBOL programming, or you have to go to the pure R&D locations where you have to deal with what you are really aspiring to be in terms of generating, creating models and algorithms and interesting computing, etc. So from day one, I brainwashed myself to be into essentially the R&D side of computing. System software, systems technology. Telecom was not that prevalent at that time. It was in a very nascent native state. Internet was also not very prevalent because .com did not exist at that time. So telecommunications, system software, both interested me, both topics. So I pursued that even after joining Tata's as my career. I wanted to be in those areas rather than doing nothing wrong with COBOL programming then. But I essentially steered myself away from getting into COBOL programming, I got more into system software side and telecommunication side. And that from then on, one thing led to the other. And I got into some interesting projects. And as part of, as a curiosity, I developed into understanding operating systems, how they have been created, compiler construction, how the thought process that went in, etc. And some of our interesting clients, they were actually interested in doing a real-time takeover of systems. And those days, the concept of hard backup and hard system takeover, they were not prevalent at that time. So, but there was a need for a client at the time, and one thing led to the other. And so I got involved in one of the projects where two major operating system, major Burroughs computers were independently running, and they had to be taking over each other if one detects that other one goes down. So that was a good R&D project that gave me insight into the operating system side of, how it is constructed and how the thought process went into. And we successfully implemented that also. And the client was very, very happy at that time because it's something which is out of the way into normal programming side. It's more of into system side. And then I got into from there, because I was dealing with the operating system and so on, some other client actually is out of the blue calls and says, hey, we need, there's a problem with one of the customers and it had to be solved immediately, and come and take a look at it and resolve it. And then that was much simpler than the patching operating system project.
Okay.
So I got it, then it was a banking client. So I got into banking side and I understood. My mind went into, okay, so now this is a situation where customer is in trouble and I'm solving it. So I should understand what the customer business is also, how it is going, etc. So I started learning banking. So that's how I got into banking side.
Oh, nice.
And that was also an interesting project. From there, I went into multiple consulting into multiple client locations. Every time I got into a mixer of not just only doing business app, got into opportunity into dealing with system and operating system, messaging software and telecommunications and so on. That's how I evolved my experience. it was very interesting journey for me. And with me, people who are involved with me also, we all enjoyed the whole thing together, dealing with those.
Yeah, interesting. See, one question that I have is that when you are working with system software, I'm kind of trying to oversimplify that. It is all about intellectual work, which you can do alone, or it is about the internals of computers and how they work, etc. But when you said that you also learned banking, you also needed to understand the business side. That is about dealing with people, dealing with how they're actually going to use it, etc. So do you have two different modes of thinking in approaching these kinds of needs and solving problems? Or is there something that works across any domain or any kind of problem domain?
It's a good question. Bottom line, LCD, lowest common denominator, is the level of kind of thinking required in both cases. Okay, there is something called, I'm just using the word here for the discussion, something called strategic thinking. The other one is called practical implementation, right? Doesn't matter what you take, even if you take a piece of coding, you have to think very, what I'm doing here, why I'm doing here, what is going to be the benefit. If that is understood, that's the lowest common aspect of it. The analysis, the analytical thinking that goes in. So it doesn't matter which side of, whether you're in system side or in the business side, solving problems. The fundamental thinking had to be the same. The way you apply that kind of thinking into solving the problem would be different. That's where the experience will come. The way the system side will work will be different to the way the business side will work. You're making a good point. The business side is involving people, process, and the technology. Whereas on the system side, it's mainly based on technology and the processes running inside the system software. So people may not be involved in that process. Only the development team will be involved, but not the actual end user. End user is actually consumer of the system software. So that, but fundamentally, the thinking is all the same. But you should have the ability to switch between isolating and solving a problem and solving at the grassroots level, versus you're solving a problem for in a business process, in a technology used by a set of people. So you have to think about that and then see whether I'm making it easy for them, whether I'm bringing efficiency for them, whether I'm bringing cost effectiveness in the implementation. All those things need to be considered. So
are there any techniques or practices that probably you have evolved over time that help you in doing this?
In terms of the business side implementations or system software implementations?
Yeah, you mentioned multiple things. One is about the strategic versus tactical or operational thinking, thinking at those different levels. And of course, the blend of the business side and the technology side. How do you switch between these modes of thinking?
Yeah, good question. The strategic thinking, leave that aside for a second. I'll come back to that because not everyone, not everybody would actually get involved in, okay, let me start with the strategy and then go and implement something. It will never happen. It's very rare. But in coming up with the, on the business side, before undertaking any piece of work, either given to you or you're actually going to give it to somebody else, or you're dealing with it directly, why that is needed for the business. Okay, maybe we will get into the discussion later on, because there's a lot of money that's being wasted in terms of not understanding what the business needs. That's a fundamental thing one has to look into before you even start writing a line of code or writing a line of specification. Why it is being done and what is it going to be, whether it's going to be helping people, helping the process, and will it result in a good technology development where very little rework and cost will get sunk into the technology. So if you put them all together, that's the strategic thinking. Okay, in a minor way. So you start with that. Why am I doing this? What am I doing this for? Rather than if I'm working as a programmer in a larger company, and my supervisor is coming and giving to me a piece of saying, hey, you have to get it done. Yes, you have to do that because supervisor is telling you, but why are you doing that? If you understand that, then you develop the business aspects of why you're doing, and that will lead to understanding the business slowly. And then over a period of time, you will solve business problems. Fundamentally, you have to understand why you're doing.
So related thing, you also mentioned that you played a role of a consultant. So many times a consultant is expected to fly in, solve the problem. So there is a lot of time pressure in not only understanding the problem, but also the business context or the situation which either led to the problem or what would be an optimal solution for them. How do you handle that kind of constraint on time while still having to think strategically, technically, business wise and everything else, and come up with a solution that will at least solve the problem and also meet the goals?
Consultants are of two types. One is, if you take the business side, business consultants, a lot of companies will go and make recommendations to the client, and then they will walk away because they would not implement it. They will implement it from somebody else. There are other type of consultants is more of a technology consulting, where you take that output from those business consultants and then translate that into technology, right? In a lot of cases, because there is no, I don't want to call it lack of ownership, it's lack of, that's not the direction. The business consulting output from the business consulting may or may not be implemented in a very cost-effective way. So the type of consulting that's required to solve a technology problem in a practical way would be slightly different to the hands of consulting. So the very fundamental rule, again, going back to now this time in an evolved way, is you have to understand why you're doing this, what is the benefit that's going to be for the business. And if I actually make further recommendations to change the system, or I change the system, or I have a team of people changing the system, what is the output is going to be? Because what happens, you may actually, again, in this case also, you can just launch something and then walk away as a consultant, but somebody else has to deal with it. And if they get the satisfaction of what you have produced as a consultant, delivered as a consultant, there's nothing like that. That joy is the best one can get as a consultant. So if I fly into a customer location, first I will try to understand what the customer is all about, why are they trying to, what kind of problem they are in, and why, how we should solve it will come later. First of all, understanding what will actually have to come first before how to solve it.
Okay,
So that's the beauty of consultant. So
okay, yeah, that seems simple, but I'm sure it requires a lot of experience or be able to
that is true.
Adjust the context and so on. So do you have any horror stories? Not necessarily very negative kind of stories, but at least the learnings. Sometimes what probably appears obvious and you try to solve it, and then you realize that the problem is actually much deeper. Or the decisions that you take may need to be revisited because some context change, either over time or even before you complete the assignment, because you didn't have the full information when you started.
Sure, yes, several. But one thing because I mentioned the takeover of two different systems, and the SLA at the time was it had to be switched when one system takes over from the other. The backup takes over from the primary. It had to be done within 30 seconds for the backup to become the primary, and vice versa. We thought it's a piece of cake because we understood the operating system, how it behaves, etc. Right? So we created a piece of construct, a script, which would actually go and external from outside. You give a command, and which will go and start killing the processes one by one on the primary, and then fire up on the backup. What we did not realize is, well, it worked in the smaller way, 10 or 15 processes time. But when you have a mainframe running 1,000 processes, when you start killing them, the process actually, to get rid of the process, operating system itself will compete with the other process. So it will never get done in 30 seconds. You'll get into race condition or deadlock conditions. So system will never take over in 30 seconds. So it was taking even an hour and a half. And that was a nightmare because it was snowing and it was an acceptance that was going on. And the CIO of the customer, he gave up and said, no, this is not going to work. You guys solve it, come back to the solution if you have to go live, otherwise we'll cancel the contract. That was a very dangerous position we were in at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was snowing, it was dumping snow outside. And it was the worst snowy condition, even if we had to get out. Then there was one more colleague, very close friend of mine. He was also working with me at the time. And so we put our heads together and then we said, okay, we'll go back to our offices and then come back within 72 hours. And then we realized that there is a different method, not by actually creating racing condition, but you follow a different method whereby you can get everything cleared within a fraction of a second. We solved that problem. And customer was so happy, and he did not expect that we would solve the problem. The only reason we could is because we understood how the operating system was constructed.
Nice.
That helped us, because understanding the theory behind and how it was built and constructed really helped in that situation. It's a very horror situation for us at that time because it was a huge dollar contract which would have been in jeopardy. And so everyone was happy in the end and we did it in maybe 48 hours. We solved it.
Oh, nice. Probably one of those examples of what normally used to be called as RTFM.
Yes.
Many times we probably read but don't really understand the nuances.
Correct.
And then suddenly in hindsight, it is a revelation.
Now, there was one more instance where this is for the banking client. We were actually installing the network. And in those days, there was no TCP/IP, or there was no, it was a basic polling protocol on a normal copper wire. And so you have different locations like 250, 300, maybe 50 to 100 locations of branches where several workstations were there, terminals were there, and they have to be up and running, and constantly the reaction time for a screen and the keyboard reaction time for a screen had to be within seconds. So there was a protocol, networking protocol, that was polling every station and then round robin basis. So every terminal will get a chance after the other 299 terminals got polled. Right. Again, the customer was very upset because the people have to wait for at least 2 or 3 seconds before they could even transmit. Then we put our heads together and solved the problem by having different kind of protocol implementation. We were able to solve it. And that again, the customer was very, very happy at that time. And it's at the telecommunication level.
Nice.
It was a nightmare for us because every time, even to when I press A to get the reaction back on A, it will take 2 seconds, which is not healthy.
Yeah. See, you used the term supervisor, about supervisor telling you what to do in an earlier context. But nowadays, the way teams are developing software is more like a team sport, where yes, you do have somebody who knows a lot more or who can be the guide. But in terms of teamwork, in terms of being able to take ownership and still have the flexibility to take decisions as you go along, what are some models that you have seen working, or what are some things that you would recommend as effectively scalable teams working on a common solution?
So it depends on the type of the need actually. If you're developing anything can be seen as I'm developing a product, but if you're developing a product in a startup company, the approach would be slightly different to the development of an application module in a larger company versus the development of the entire application in a larger company. Okay, so depending on the type of interaction required in an established company, each organization will have its own processes, system development processes, and methodology. So one has to fit in with anybody, any team, a supervisor or a team working together. They have to fit in, and if they all understood, saying this is how the application gets developed in an organization, then the entire team will be productive. I'll come to that in the next layer in a second. Then in a product development shop, the product idea is thought together. Whoever starts a company, a CTO or the founders of the company will have an idea of a product because they see the industry need and they're trying to solve some business problem, and they know they can actually get something going, so that either they become a unicorn, that's their dream, right? When you start a company, or take over by somebody else. But in the whole process, I develop a product. So that would be a smaller team, and all the team members will put their heads together, and they would have, it's like a scrum. They would have an understanding of how to deal with every other player in the scrum, how to pass the ball from one to the other, and then get it done. So there'll be a common understanding. And in the past, there were all kinds of names was given for that kind of programming, but it's essentially nowadays, it's essentially a sprint within which members will be working together to reach a common goal. And there'll be a scrum and scrum meeting or scrum discussion. And every member in the team will have a common understanding of what that output is going to be achieving at the end of the sprint and working towards that. So, and you can apply the same model to the application development also, except that you may have to involve a lot more departments, a lot more people in a large organization. So it may become kind of difficult to manage. So then there'll be higher level processes put in place where, hey, the Scrum kind of discussion may or may not result in a good documentation. So you have to have a mixer of the old type of waterfall model versus the sprint planning Scrum model in between. You have to have, so if there is a documented specifications or requirements, then everybody can follow that by reading that, by understanding that. So it's a question of whether you have anything documented or not is where the differentiation will come in terms of large team, small team, how it's going to be discussed, implemented, etc.
So a related aspect when you talk about teamwork is also the culture of the team and the organization.
Correct.
And in your case, I know that you have shifted continents.
Mm-hmm.
You worked in multiple continents. And of course, you're working with global teams, which also adds to the same aspect of having people with different backgrounds, different cultures, and so on.
Right.
So what do you think is the influence of this kind of diversity or this kind of variations that you have? And how could one still be productive as a team?
See, what the question is you're posing is very relevant to right now what's going on with COVID also. Even within the same team, the teams are now distributed, they are remote. So the question is very relevant to, if I actually rephrase it, how to bring efficiency with the remotely distributed teams is what I think you are heading to in your question, if I'm right.
Both. I mean, that adds another layer. You've added one more. Mine was even more basic in terms of in a team, when it is not, the members are not with the same homogeneous background, cultural background, whether in terms of their countries where they are located or even their own approach to how things work.
Yeah.
I've seen some styles of working changing from country to country. What you find in the US versus Europe versus Far East versus Australia and all that. So since you have experience in multiple of these geographies, I just want to know what has been your experience of, let's say, when you were a new member in a team in a new country or continent, how did you get integrated, or what are the challenges that you might have faced? And now in your role when you are running teams, what are some things that you do to help the teaming aspect quicker and effective?
Okay.
And of course, you have now the distributor, I call it the dispersed mode of working.
Yeah. So when I started initially, I had the luxury of co-located teams. I mean, all the team members were in one location, though they came from even within, I'm quoting the country India here, even within India, we all come from multiple states. We don't speak the same language, and we don't eat the same one kind of food, because every region has different kinds of food. So we come from different backgrounds, and understanding again the mutual understanding of the communication, which is one language which helped us, all of us, was English. I don't know Hindi, for example. English was the only language I could communicate with others. So that common understanding English helped us in a co-located team to get into knowing each other and then being productive. And same thing when I had non-Indian members in my team. And again, the same thing, the common communication was English, and there was a process or methodology put in place. So, and if there is a lack of something that is there in the process, then we could create a new, plug the hole and get it done. There was a common understanding because of co-location, right? Now, once that initial understanding is there, exists, then if that person gets transferred from, let's say, Los Angeles to, let's say, Detroit, now you have already established the connection and the rapport with that person. And it's a question of using the same person in Detroit. So the distance factor, except that when you may have to get up early morning, or he may have to get up or stay late in the night to talk to you because you're in Pacific, etc. Removing that factor out, because it's part of doing work in business, because you had created a rapport, understanding of what Nani needs and what Joe Blow can deliver, and vice versa, that helped quite a lot. Same thing, if from my team, if somebody went back to India, that level of understanding, this is what Nani would be looking for, and this is what I'm looking for from Joe Blog from India, that understanding was perfect. And because of distance separation, there will be inefficiency that would be addressed as part of rework. Because of distance separation, rework will be a lot more.
Mhm.
So if that is understood, and we find ways and means to reduce rework, yeah, then the productivity will not suffer. So to go back to that, okay, now if the entire team is distributed, then there are in the older days there are not distributed software development available. So you have to write it in a piece of paper as a document or design document or architecture document or specification or requirement, whatever, and then you have to ship it over. Nowadays, there are tools available, and so which help. Doesn't matter where I am, I can actually use the tool to understand what needed to be done. And if I am participating in a Scrum with the tool, that actually reduces the communication gap. So whether my staff, or I am in Russia or India or US, or my staff is in Ukraine or South America, doesn't matter. We have, for example, in my current situation, I have teams all over the world, 24/7. They are working, and there is a common goal of understanding as to what time majority people will be available, and then work towards that, and you get it done. So it's a question of give and take, and it's a question of understanding the need. Again, going back to what the business needs, and if that is understood, and the domain specific aspects you need to put into your design, development, and even software. If that is understood by whoever is in the team, the retraining and reworking, all those will slowly come down over a period of time. I don't know whether I'm actually giving you a very straightforward answer. It's a question of understanding what the team needs, what understanding business needs, and understanding how each one interpersonally operate, and then work. There is a thing called producing results with others. There used to be a company called TRACOM, TRACOM,
Okay.
and they used to have a pro style model. And so if that model is even whether you're remote or next to each other, that's equally applicable, and producing results with others. I think that had to be inculcated into the modern software development as to how to produce results with others, because not everybody is the same. Not everybody is a robot or automaton or clone of each other. If that is understood by everybody in the team, then productivity will not suffer.
I think this is a very, very important topic. And then these pointers will definitely be very useful. I didn't realize that we've already been talking for a while. I normally like to conclude the conversations with some career advice for two segments of people. One, those who are considering a career in IT. Is there still a future in IT? Or what should they do to get prepared for a career in IT? And the second is for people who are going through, let's say, a decision time in their careers, typically in the mid to sometimes even senior roles, as to what they should do or how they can choose what they should plan for.
In terms of people coming out of colleges, the career tips. So for the next 10 years, the entire technology space is evolving into data science and security, cybersecurity, and then bio. So a combination of bio studies with data science would be one approach, whereby you can get into either data science and analytics career, or programming or software development within that space. The other side is if you really want to go into real challenging technology consulting or software services role, security is a place. In terms of the data science, where it is today is in terms of where internet was 10, 15 years back. Internet was a new thing. Not everybody was afraid of. At the same time, everybody wants to, because the glamour to go after internet terminology and so on. So companies spanned, .com spanned, right? Now it's there embedded. You and I now are talking through the same internet backbone.
Yeah.
Similarly, the data science as a technique will be embedded. It's getting embedded very fast. AI is put in on top of that. So it will be given as a layer in everything we do, whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not, it will be. So make hay while the sun shines, because data science, analytics, business analytics will be embedded like internet was 10 years back into everything we do. Security would be another, is evolving, it's challenging. With every technology changing, network changing, the security evolves and becomes complicated, cybersecurity specifically. So if somebody understands and the nuances, they can make a fantastic career out of that. So those are the areas. Beyond that, if you really are interested in, I like programming and I like coding and so on, there are new languages, new things that are getting developed constantly. So if you know Python, if you know Kotlin, Java, they're prevalent everywhere. So would be fine. And because Python is definitely now an R for data science and Python for data science and web development. If somebody wants to start in programming, those are the areas where you can get into. Okay, now for the middle career, you try to, first of all, best suggestion I would give would be understand what the business is doing, understand the business side, and then go with the flow of the business. What happens is in everything you do, make sure that the revenue side is not affected for the business. As long as you contribute to the revenue side of the business, your career would be on the right path. Okay.
Yeah, that's good. At least reassuring that whether you are starting now or in mid-career, there is still a long runway in terms of good future in IT.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Because technology is needed. It's not, technology is not dead. It's evolving.
Mm.
One of my friends would say the general ledger, account receivable, account payable, the need still exists. It's all the old wine getting rebottled in a new bottle constantly. whether it is departmental computing, mainframe computing, or terminal computing, or internet computing. Still, the need is there, need exists. So technology need will always exist to solve business problems.
Yeah, thanks, Nani. On that note,
Thank you.
I think we just have about time for this conversation. Thanks a lot for sharing your experience, your story. I know that there are a lot of other interesting stories. Maybe we'll catch up on that next time.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.